Michigan, we should note the congressman does hold an investment in Chrysler. Good to have you, Representative McCotter. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. And how much is that investment worth?
You tell me. Thousand?
I think it's worth about $16.
Really?
My grandparents bought it for me when I was a child. And the way things are going, I don't know it's going to be worth much. Maybe get a couple lattes.
All right, you just broke it down. Most people know that if they own stock in these companies or any kind of investment, it's just not worth a lot right now. But the future of the U.S. auto company is worth a lot. You are breaking from your brethren in the U.S. Senate, the GOP, that are vehemently against this thing. Why are you for it?
Well, we've seen the restructuring process in Michigan continue. It was very painful for us. Companies like Ford, which are smaller than GM, did manage to make the turn and start to show profitability even as late as January of last year. So what we want to see is a bridge loan for liquidity purposes to get past some of the credit crisis that they're seeing and get them into next year where they can continue a restructuring process. And because largely I have seen the restructuring that's occurred, and we in Michigan understand that the bridge loan means the painful restructuring continues.
All right, but Congressman, our reference to Cerberus wasn't accidental. I mean, the fact is that this is a private equity firm that owns Chrysler. They have, it's estimated, because a lot of their financials are private because they're not a public company, it's estimated that its investments in Chrysler estimate about 7% of their assets. They haven't been putting their own cash into Chrysler, which they could have been doing in far larger numbers. Why should the taxpayer be paying off a rich private equity firm?
Absolutely agree with the transparency and the need to understand what Cerberus has or has not done, and to allow, as the CARSAR would do, to go into that and to determine it. We in southeastern Michigan especially are grateful for you bringing that up, because Chrysler has just announced earlier last month that they were laying off 25% of their white-collar workforce. And we are trying to get them to invest more in the car company, to be competitive and to be supportive of the employees, the men and women in that industry. So I personally would have no problem with the transparency and give the AutoCar the ability, which I believe is in the bill, to go into that.
What's your plan to get this passed? Have you been speaking with senators who are completely against this? How do you get it to your side?
Well, first, as a House member, anytime a piece of legislation we pass goes to the Senate, our first option is prayer. We have a bicameral legislature, which means that just because we make an opinion on something, it will go over to the Senate, they will put in their opinion, and then we will continue a process. My position has always been I can understand the conscience of some members not being able to do this. We would hope for a vote on the House bill up or down, but if that does not occur and the Senate sends us something back, we will be prepared to come back and try to address those concerns.
Now, first of all, did you say prayer was your first option?
Yes. The Senate does not generally seek us out for consultation and advice on the matters.
I guess not. But Congressman, I don't mean to be harping on a horse here, but the fact is that Cerberus has some very powerful people involved with it. People look at John Snow, recently the Treasury Secretary, who's the CEO. They look at folks like Dan Quayle, like ex-Senator John Breaux, who both work as lobbyists for it. And America sees this inside the Beltway thing going on with all the lobbyists working for their buddies. Is that perception, is there something wrong with that perception, or are the American people on the mark?
No, I think that if you ask people, especially in light of what happened with the Wall Street bailout, that perception is actually justified. So again, the concerns that we have about Cerberus have always been there, especially when we found out that they were buying Chrysler, for precisely the reasons you talk about, the lack of transparency. And on our end, as people who work in the industry and depend on that, we were very concerned they would not have a commitment to the entity as an automaking industry. That is something that, again, we agree on.
I'd like to get your opinion and your thought on the U.S. auto worker, because we get a lot of email here, people questioning whether they make too much for relatively unskilled labor, as some of these emailers put it. But you had an anecdote about the Wixom plant in Michigan, talking about something that happened there that indicated to you that these people deserve the help that they're asking for.
Yes, I've been through the plants too. These people, we stood out in the snow in front of Ford on a very cold day. They wanted to work so desperately. They didn't want to see the plant close. The auto industry has so much now high tech in terms of how you make a car, that they are not only skilled, they are also devoted to putting forward a product. And they have gone through some painful decisions that they've made in conjunction with management, and they also understand that's going to continue. Even President Gettelfinger has said that they know that they have to bring concessions to the table. But to look at a fellow American and say you make too much money in the private sector, especially when government says it, is kind of disquieting to me as a Republican.
Well, and since you brought up Ford, let's talk a little bit more about Ford. Alan Mulally, I think most people agree, has done a terrific job in the past year. A year ago, people were saying that Ford was the weaker of the three sisters. Now everybody agrees that Ford's in a better position than the other two. Is it conceivable that Ford will avoid taking any part of this loan?
I think that Ford it does two things. One, it shows how quickly a company can turn around under the right leadership and under the right commitment, and I think that it also shows that this has been going on. But again, Ford is smaller. It was easier to make those decisions and transactions to become globally competitive than, say, for GM. It also shows us some other things. The auto companies did not want to come here. If you think about the price tag of $15 billion, that is a lot of taxpayers' money. But think about all the strings that are being talked about going with it in terms of your internal management and your own ability to operate as a private entity. If they certainly did not want to be in this position.
Representative McCotter, thank you, and we appreciate your comments because it's interesting to see a Republican who is for this. Of course, it is your home state that gets affected the most, but that certainly broadens the aperture of the picture.
And I think Cerberus is going to call you up and offer to buy back that share from you.
I'm telling you, it's like 2 shares, man. Too much effort to even sign the check.
Thanks a lot, Congressman. Great to see you. Appreciate it. By the way, again, Alan Mulally, what he has